let's dive into some opera and musical theater from the late 19th century. So we're going to be wrapping up opera for the Romantic era, and we're going to be moving on to the rest of the Romantic era after that, but let's get right into this. So no discussion about opera would be complete without discussing Richard Wagner. Born in Germany, he eventually had to flee to Switzerland after he supported the 1848 to 1849 insurrection. He was raised by his mother and his stepfather and studied music in Dresden and Leipzig. And it was his stepfather that kind of helped encourage him to study music. In his 20s, he began writing operas and working for various opera companies. He worked as a court musician until, that whole insurrection thing and he had to flee. And after that, he was supported by wealthy patrons who just loved him and his work and just wanted to give him money to keep writing. His big contributions include a series of essays on music and influential thoughts on how music should support the drama. And you're going to kind of see that here in a little bit. Not the other way around. It was the music should support the drama. It was about really portraying the feelings and the pathos of the message. He wrote massive operas, and he wrote a chord so bizarre that it is named after one of the characters in his operas. And he also was responsible for getting an instrument invented. So, yay! Wagner basically said that Beethoven took instrumental music as far as it could go. And his Ninth Symphony, he argued, was Beethoven acknowledging that vocal music was the next realm that needed to be conquered. And his chorus showed that that was the next logical progression. And he viewed himself as the true successor to Beethoven. Wagner was unique in that he wrote his own librettos. Now, we've gone over this term before, but I am going to ask you about it this week. Wagner wrote his own librettos for his opera. Now, libretto, again, is the text. So Wagner didn't just write the music, he also wrote the text. So he wrote every component of it. He wrote both the tunes and the words that went with it. His most colossal work is what's called the Ring Cycle, or the Ring of Nibelung. And it's a series of 4 operas that are meant to be done back to back, and that's about 15 hours worth of performing material. So you do it over different nights, but little bit massive amount of work, and it's just like the most massive musical work really ever written, and he took 26 years to write it. The opera combines medieval stories from German poems and Nordic legends, and of course the theme is love and betrayal, because what else would it be in opera? I'm going to give you, there is on your playlist, if you're doing the YouTube playlist, a great little 2.5-minute clip from I think like the Sydney Opera House or Sydney Symphonic Orchestra. I don't remember. But it summarizes 15 hours of story in 2.5 minutes, and it's pretty hilarious. So I encourage you to listen to that. And then what I want you to listen to is one of the instrumental selections from the opera, and it's one of the most famous ever written. It's called The Flight of the Valkyries. This comes to us from the Ring Cycle. It sounds like film music, and honestly, this is where film composers, this is the birth of these kinds of sounds, these dramatic sounds. This is where it really originates from. So take a listen to that 2.5 minutes summarizing the Ring Cycle, and then take a listen to at least the first bit of The Flight of the Valkyries from the Ring Cycle. Now, I mentioned to you that Wagner also invented an instrument, and it was for the Ring Cycle. He wanted another instrument that split the difference between a French horn and a trombone. And what we wound up with was that instrument that's highlighted in pink, the Wagner tuba, which is played like a French horn. The music is sometimes written like French horn in F. Sometimes it's written in B flat. Even Wagner wasn't consistent in how he wrote the music. The valves are like a French horn. Obviously, the shape is a little different. The bell, which is the curved part at the end, is a little bit different, how it flares out. And so it's kind of got a little bit of a different tone. You have heard a Wagner tuba before. It's very likely that you have. And where have you heard it? The Universal theme song. Da-da-dun, dun, da-da-dun-dun-dun, boom, boom. That's a French horn. But when that comes in the second time, da-da-dun, dun, da-da-dun-dun, boom, boom, that is a choir of Wagner tubas, actually. Subtly different from the French horn, but almost imperceptible. The other thing, as I mentioned, that we need to just briefly talk about is he came up with a chord that literally there's no harmonic analysis that fits it, and so it's just got its own name. It's called the Tristan chord from his opera Tristan and Isolde. And what it is, it's a tritone, and then there's a perfect fourth set a major third above that. So there's the excerpt where it first shows up is right there. Listen to it how it goes. So it starts like this, and then here it is. It kind of starts to just go away. You hear this longing that never really resolves, but this is the chord. Listen to it again. It's just such a great chord. You're just like, oh, someone wants something but is not getting it, which is love in opera. That's basically what it is. Again, it defies harmonic analysis, so it just got its own name, the Tristan chord. And this is an example of what's called a leitmotif, or a leitmotif. And what that is where, and this is common in Wagner opera, a character or a feeling, there would be some kind of musical theme, short little motive, that would show up each time. So you knew when you heard it, oh, that's the feeling of longing. And you knew that from the words that had been sung the first time you heard it. Oh, that's the feeling of questioning. Oh, that's the feeling of love. Oh, Tristan must be showing up, but I don't see him on the stage. He must be hiding somewhere. Like, that's what a leitmotif is. It's a short theme that is associated with a very specific emotion or character, and it will show up over and over in different songs throughout the opera. So if you've got a moment, I'd love for you to listen to the prelude or overture from the introduction of the Ring Cycle. Absolutely phenomenal. Take a listen to that. At least listen through the first couple minutes of it. It's really, really great music. And also, I think I've got the Tristan and Isolde chord on there as well, if you would like to listen to that. Now, what Wagner was doing in Germany, Verdi was doing in Italy. So Giuseppe Verdi was really the next major successful opera composer from Italy, and he succeeded Donizetti as the leading opera composer in Italy. He was the son of an innkeeper, but he studied music and wrote his first successful opera when he was 26, and his last one when he was 80. So, unlike Donizetti, this guy just kept writing for all of his life. Pretty amazing. Verdi wrote some really great melodies, and this writing style, and his writing style was, in the way he would compose, sorry, lost my train of thought there. He'd get the libretto, or the text, he'd write the tunes, then he'd write some basic harmonies, then he would rehearse with the singers, and he'd finish orchestrating it. So he had lots of time, he took lots of time to put his operas together. And he could do this because he got paid better, because copyright laws were better. So people actually had to pay him for his music and weren't just, using it willy-nilly. So, incredible stuff. He also wrote an incredible requiem that is worth listening to. His successor in Italy was a guy by the name of Giacomo Puccini. And Puccini's primary difference from Verdi was that all his music kind of flowed together in his operas. Each piece didn't have the same distinct standalone feel in the operas. So below, I have some lists of songs from both of them, and I'd like you to listen to at least part of one from each, although they're all really, really good. The Dies Irae is from Verdi's Requiem that he wrote, and it's just terrifying, and it's awesome. It's just anger. The text is the day of wrath of God. So, yeah, that's fun. You've got La Donna Mobile, which is one of the most popular arias you're ever going to hear. You're probably going to recognize it. It's from Rigoletto, and this is Andrea Bocelli singing it. He's the blind tenor opera singer, and just phenomenal. There's Liviamo from Traviata, and this is the three tenors concert where they did this. This is Pavarotti, Jose Carreras, and Placido Domingo all together singing, and it's just fantastic. From Puccini, you've got O mio babbino caro, from his opera Gianni Schicchi, and It's such a beautiful soprano aria. You'll probably recognize it. There's also Nessun Dorma from Toronto, which is a tenor aria that you'll probably also recognize, and incidentally, Toronto is Miss Mendez's favorite opera. Or Si mi chiamano la Mimi from La Boheme. So choose one from each composer at least to listen to. They're either heartbreakingly beautiful, funny, one of them is a drinking song, Libiamo, or they are just like the Dies Irae, terrifying. So take a listen to one of each and then come back and join us. All right, now we have to turn to Russia. And the musician that became a household name from this era is, of course, none other than Peter Tchaikovsky. Trained as a lawyer, and he worked as a government official for 4 years before he decided to study music at the newly found St. Petersburg Conservatory. So music wasn't like as formal a tradition in Russia up to this point. But then there were some musicians that decided we need formal training in Russia. And so he went to St. Petersburg, he studied there, and then he was offered a job to teach at the Moscow Conservatory, which was also new, and he went to teach there. He wrote opera, but he also wrote symphonies, he wrote some smaller works, some overtures, and we remember overtures are like introductions to operas, so these have now become standalone things as well. You probably are familiar with his 1812 overture, which is the one that has church bells and calls for literal cannons to be fired at part of it. Da, 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 da. Anyways, most importantly though, he also wrote ballets. Now, ballet, of course, is a musical work that features instrumental music and dancing. There's no singing, there's no text, it's just no speaking, it's just dance and music to express the story. He wrote Swan Lake, he wrote Sleeping Beauty, and then the other one, which you, I'm sure, all know, The Nutcracker. Every Christmas, The Nutcracker. And this was a big deal because this really brought to the fore the form of ballet. So what I'd like you to do, if you haven't listened to The Nutcracker, this is not on your playlist, but if you don't know The Nutcracker, I would encourage you to go to listen almost any selection from it. Dance of the Reed Flutes or Dance of the Sugar Plum Fairies. You likely will recognize it, but if you're not sure, pick at least one piece to go listen to. Otherwise, I would encourage you to listen to his aria Kuda Kuda from his opera Eugene Onegin. Just an incredible aria, and it's in Russian, which is really cool. It's not something we hear very often. All right, take a listen.